Last week, Willie and Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and I were over in Switzerland, and we're talking about just that. I was trying to figure out how long I'd known Willie and when, and we couldn't even remember when we met each other. He kind of worked his way into my consciousness, and I don't remember when I didn't know him.
Kris Kristofferson and Willie Nelson weren't just country music icons. They were outlaws who changed the game. But beneath the music was a friendship filled with tension, rivalry, and even rumors of a love triangle. Now, Willie's latest comments about Kris have fans wondering, is this genuine praise or just respect for the dead? If you know anything about music legends, then you've definitely heard of Kris Kristofferson, the singer, songwriter, and actor who ruled the scene back in the 1980s. He was more than just a star. He was a full-blown symbol, stealing hearts both on stage and on screen. So, when news broke that Kristofferson had passed away at 88, fans everywhere were hit with a wave of sadness. According to his rep, he died peacefully at his home in Maui, Hawaii, but that didn't make the loss any easier. The world had just said goodbye to an entertainment icon. Kristofferson first made his mark in Nashville during the 1960s, writing timeless classics like Me and Bobby McGee, Sunday Morning Coming Down, and Help Me Make It Through the Night. His songs weren't just hits. They were anthems for dreamers, rebels, and hopeless romantics. But his fame exploded when he hit the big screen. His most iconic role? Starring opposite Barbra Streisand in the 1976 remake of A Star Is Born, a film that cemented his status as a Hollywood heartthrob. Kristofferson was also a key player in the outlaw country movement, alongside legends like Willie Nelson. These guys broke the rules, pushed boundaries, and created a sound that shook up the country music scene. Speaking of Willie Nelson, the man has lived a wild 91 years, surviving financial disasters, betrayals, narcotics busts, and even being blacklisted from the industry. But through all of that, he still reflects on the people who shaped his life. And guess what? Kristofferson's name is at the top of that list. So why now? Well, rumors concerning Nelson and Kristofferson's complex relationship have been circulating the media for decades. What was their relationship like? Were they best friends or secret rivals? Did they admire each other or low-key hate each other? And if they were so tight, why did they sometimes drift apart? Sure, they were both leaders of the outlaw country movement in the 1970s, shaking up Nashville with their raw, rebellious sound. But their relationship, it was complicated. So, what was really going on between them? Were they brothers in arms or just two legends who happened to walk the same path? We're about to unpack the truth, but first let's rewind to where it all began, when Willie and Kris joined forces and changed country music forever. Where it all started? By the late 90s, Nashville had completely taken over country music. The industry operated like a dictator, dictating not just how the music sounded, but how the artists themselves dressed, spoke, and behaved. If you wanted to make it big, you had to play by their rules. That meant sticking to safe, predictable themes: heartbreak, drinking, and small-town nostalgia. The moment an artist stepped out of line or tried to do something different, they were tossed aside like yesterday's newspaper. The industry picked the stars and made sure anyone who didn't fit their mold was left behind. But not everyone was willing to bow down, and that's where the real outlaws came in. Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson weren't about to let Nashville box them in. For Willie, breaking into country music wasn't easy. He showed up in the late 1950s dreaming of making it big. But instead of taking center stage, he got stuck behind the scenes as a songwriter. He wrote killer songs, but when it came to his own music, let's say he wasn't doing so well. He wasn't as polished as Hank Snow, nor was he the heart-stealing heartthrob that they wanted their male artist to be. His voice was gritty, his delivery unconventional, and his ideas about music were way ahead of their time. The Nashville execs had no clue how to sell him. He was a square peg to be fitted in a round hole, and they just weren't ready for that stress. Kris Kristofferson's story was totally different, but just as rebellious. He was a war hero, turned poet, a scholar who could have had a prestigious career in the military or academia, but instead he chose to sweep floors at Columbia Studios just to be close to the music. His songs were raw, deep, and way too real for Nashville's taste. While most country artists were singing about drinking and cheating, Kris was writing about regret, war, and existential crises. Things that hit way too hard for country radio. Let's keep it real here. These studio bosses are all about the money, and naturally they'll stick to the formula that rolls in the dough. To be fair, some musical Soren Kierkegaard doesn't look like someone who will keep the money mills churning, because neither of them fit the Nashville formula. They were both pushed aside. But then, in 1970, Kris pulled off one of the wildest moves in country music history. Determined to get his music in front of the right people, he stole a National Guard helicopter and landed it on Johnny Cash's lawn, just to hand him a demo of Sunday Morning Coming Down. Wherever the guts to pull this kind of stunt came from, we don't know, but that was the kind of guy Kris was. He believed in his music so much that he was willing to risk a felony charge just to get it in front of the right person. And honestly, that's the kind of energy it took to break into the industry back then. Cash was blown away. He performed the song live on his show, and just like that, Kris Kristofferson became a star overnight. The same industry that once shut Kris Kristofferson out was suddenly trying to cash in on his name. Funny how fast things change when you finally prove them wrong. But while Kris was riding his wave of success, Willie Nelson was still stuck in a cycle of failure. His record label, RCA, had no clue what to do with him. They tried everything to force him into the industry's mold. Suits, slicked back hair, a cleaned-up image. All to appeal to Nashville's conservative crowd. And guess what? It wasn't working. Willie was on the verge of quitting music altogether when Kristofferson stepped in. He saw what Nashville didn't. Willie wasn't the problem. The industry was. So he told Willie straight up, forget Nashville. Head to Texas. At the time, Texas, especially Austin and Luckenbach, was becoming something wild. The bars and honky-tonks weren't filled with Nashville's buttoned-up country stars. They were packed with long-haired cowboys, bikers, hippies, and rebels. And the best part, nobody cared about the rules. For Willie, it sounded too good to be true, but honestly, what did he have to lose? So he packed up and left Nashville behind, heading straight to Austin. And when he got there, he found something he never had in Tennessee, an audience that actually embraced him for who he was. Gone were the slick suits and forced image. Willie grew out his hair and beard, ditched the industry-approved look, and started playing packed-out shows filled with people who didn't care if he had a radio hit. They just loved his music. Texas gave him something Nashville never did, creative freedom. And with that freedom, Willie didn't just find success, he helped start a movement. By the 1970s, he and Kristofferson were leading a full-on rebellion against Nashville's polished sound. This wasn't just about making music, it was about taking country back from the suits and letting the artists be real. Their careers were finally taking off, but let's be real. Did they actually have it all together? Or was it all fame on the surface and chaos behind the scenes? Let's dive in and uncover what was really going on. Willie and Kristofferson's personal life. Now there have been whispers of a secret rivalry between Willie and Kris. The music industry was no stranger to competition, especially in the country music niche where artists fought for recognition, almost like a dog-eat-dog situation. However, the tension between Willie and Kris wasn't about ego or animosity. It was more of Willie's determination to be as good as Kris was. I mean, Kristofferson was the golden boy. He made success look like a walk in the park. However, Willie was still fighting for his place in the industry. Despite having penned some of country music's most popular songs, the business saw him as a behind-the-scenes person, rather than a star in his own right. In contrast, Kristofferson was thriving. He was winning Grammys, appearing on national television, and breaking into Hollywood. By the mid-1970s, he had landed a major role in the 1976 hit A Star Is Born, alongside Barbra Streisand. For a while, Kris Kristofferson had everything Willie Nelson wanted: artistic respect, awards, and a career that stretched beyond country music. But by the late 1970s and early 80s, the tables had completely turned. Willie wasn't just successful, he was unstoppable. He was selling out stadiums, dropping back-to-back hit albums, and leading a full-blown movement. Meanwhile, Kristofferson's career started shifting. His music wasn't charting like before, and his acting gigs became less stable. And this is where the rumors started. Some people believe Kristofferson was jealous. After all, the spotlight that once belonged to him was now shining directly on Willie. To make things worse, Kristofferson's personal life was spiraling. Alcoholism, failed relationships, and a growing reputation for being difficult to work with. But here's the thing. That wasn't even the real reason these two had tension. So what actually caused the rift between them? If you guessed a woman, then you're correct. It was a dangerous love triangle that nearly ended everything. Not many people know this, but Kris and Willie were both rumored to be in love with the same woman. This wasn't just any woman, though. It was Rita Coolidge, a stunning, insanely talented singer-songwriter who had the music world and its men wrapped around her finger. By the time she met Kris Kristofferson, she was already a media sensation. With her soulful voice and effortless charm, she had worked with some of the biggest names in music. And let's just say, Kris and Willie weren't immune to her spell. Kristofferson and Coolidge tied the knot in 1973, and at first, it was pure passion. But behind the scenes, their relationship was a roller coaster. Jealousy, infidelity, emotional struggles, and Kris's battle with drinking made things messy. He loved her, no doubt. But between fame, pressure, and his own demons, love just wasn't enough. And then there was the rumor that started it all. Before Kris came into the picture, Coolidge and Willie allegedly had a thing. While neither Willie nor Coolidge openly confirmed a relationship, it was speculated that the two had a brief but significant romance before Kris entered the scene. Although no one knows how deep their involvement was, it was obvious that this news affected Kristofferson, who was often known to be possessive and volatile in nature, and this caused a tension between the two men. Eventually, the marriage between Kristofferson and Coolidge fell apart in 1980, after years of intense highs and devastating lows. Coolidge would later say upon reflection on her relationship with Kristofferson that while he had a beautiful soul, his self-destructive tendencies made love almost impossible to sustain. Kristofferson himself would later admit that losing Rita was one of the biggest regrets of his life. However, by the time their marriage ended, he had already begun drifting away from the peak of his own career, while Willie was in the midst of his own transformation into one of the biggest names in the outlaw movement. But did the rumored love triangle permanently damage their friendship? Although, it's hard to say for sure. Their personal lives shifted, and so did their careers. Kristofferson was about to face the most difficult period in his life, while Willie was rising to the absolute peak of country music stardom. But let's be real, Willie wasn't exactly scandal-free. From tax fraud to narcotics busts and a whole lot of cheating, Willie had his fair share of messy headlines. Meanwhile, Kris was battling something even more personal, a crippling alcohol addiction that wrecked his relationships and made Hollywood a brutal place to navigate. His alcohol use often made headlines, and while it didn't completely ruin his music career, it sure made things much harder for him in the long run. Willie, on the other hand, his troubles were mostly self-inflicted. The guy had one of the biggest tax scandals in music history, thanks to trusting the wrong people and living by his own rules. Fans loved his rebellious spirit, but the IRS, not so much. And his love life? A total roller coaster. Willie married multiple times, had several affairs, and even fathered children outside of marriage. However, despite these challenges, he never let them hold him back. Instead, he turned his problems into inspiration, whether through his music, his humor, or simply outlasting every challenge thrown his way. So while Kris was fighting his demons, Willie was out living his scandals and writing his own legend. Moving on, what has Willie come out to say about his old friend that has the internet abuzz? Could he be telling us more about what transpired between the two iconic outlaws? Stay with us until the end to find out. Willie's comments about Kristofferson. The legendary musician Willie Nelson, at 91, remembers everything about his music journey and one of his greatest friends, Kris Kristofferson. Now we all know these two had an extensive collaboration in the past, performing and writing unique songs. Nelson is making headlines and their supporters around the world are feeling nostalgic. Let's discover what Mr. Nelson has to reveal. Willie Nelson, known for his easygoing manner, rebellious temperament, and lasting tunes, recently made an unexpected statement about his longtime buddy and partner, Kris Kristofferson. And this wasn't just a casual shout-out, It was a moment. In classic Willie style, the outlaw icon dropped an unexpected statement that's shaken up the music world. He's given us a whole new take on Kristofferson's legacy. And trust me, you don't want to miss this. In true Willie Nelson fashion, he kept it real, calling Kris Kristofferson one of the greatest songwriters of all time. Now, coming from Willie, a man who's penned some of country music's most legendary hits, this wasn't just a casual compliment. It was a statement. To drive his point home, Willie compared Kris to legends like Merle Haggard and Hank Williams, putting him in the same league as the greatest storytellers the genre has ever seen. But why is this such a big deal? Because Willie and Kris weren't just collaborators. They were brothers in music, navigating the wild ups and downs of the industry together. They didn't just write songs. They poured their souls into every lyric, every melody, every moment on stage. So when Willie speaks on Kris's legacy, he's not just saying something nice for the cameras. He's speaking from experience. He watched Kris live his lyrics, pouring every ounce of pain, love, and rebellion into his music. It is indeed a rare occurrence to witness one legend pay tribute to another in such a manner. While Willie takes pride in his own contributions, he recognizes a unique inspiration in Kristofferson's music that resonates not only with him, but also with millions of audiences globally. This statement had the internet losing its mind, creating a hair-splitting divide that had it talking for days. Some fans couldn't agree more, celebrating Kris as a once-in-a-lifetime artist. Others, not so convinced. Suddenly, new listeners started diving into Kris's catalog, listening to his music with fresh ears, and some of them were shocked they didn't appreciate him sooner. So, could Willie's words spark a Kristofferson renaissance? Is the world finally ready to give Kris the flowers he deserved all along? Dolly Parton was among the first to resonate with Willie's sentiments. In a moving statement, she stated, "Kris has always been one of the most genuine songwriters I know. Understanding what he endured makes his artistry even more extraordinary. Now, when Dolly speaks, the world listens, and for good reason. This is a woman who knows great songwriting when she hears it. And she's not alone. Other artists also shared their 2 cents, recounting the impact he has had on the genre, reflecting on how Kris Kristofferson shaped country music. But what really hit home? The realization that Kris's life wasn't all fame and fortune. He struggled, and those struggles poured into his music, making his lyrics raw, honest, and deeply relatable. One thing's for sure, Willie made sure Kris got his flowers even if he wasn't here to see it. And that's what real friendship looks like. While some songwriters tell stories, Kristofferson makes you feel them. Every lyric he wrote felt like it was handpicked to hit you right in the soul. His ability to turn everyday words into something deeply emotional is what made him a legend. And keeping it factual, not everyone can do that. Ever listen to "Help Me Make It Through the Night"? That song isn't just about love or loneliness. It's about being human, about that raw need for connection. Kristofferson had a way of making you feel like he was singing your own thoughts back to you, even if you'd never said them out loud. His secret? Vulnerability. He wasn't afraid to talk about the messy, complicated, and painful parts of life. But he did it with a kind of warmth and understanding that made his music comforting, not just heartbreaking. And that's why his songs don't just fade out when they're over. They stay with you. Days later, you'll catch yourself humming a line or thinking about a lyric that just makes sense now in a way it didn't before. Kristofferson's music wasn't just about entertainment. It was about life, love, loss, and everything in between. So next time one of his songs comes on, listen closely. You might just hear a piece of yourself in his words. Willie Nelson recently shocked fans with his heartfelt words about Kris Kristofferson, proving that no matter their past differences, their friendship was bigger than any rivalry. These two didn't just make music. They changed country music forever. Their sound was the perfect mix of country, rock, and folk that felt both rebellious and timeless. And unlike the cookie-cutter songs dominating radio, their lyrics actually meant something. They tackled real-life struggles, love, loss, politics, and the raw, messy parts of being human. And let's not forget the Highwaymen, the legendary supergroup that included Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings. These 4 outlaws rewrote the rules of country music, proving that artists didn't have to conform to Nashville's polished, radio-friendly sound. They paved the way for today's biggest country stars who dare to push boundaries. But now, Willie is the last one standing. The rest of the highwaymen are gone, but their legacy remains untouchable. Even today, their music still hits just as hard, and their impact on the industry is impossible to ignore. Willie isn't just keeping their music alive, he's making sure their fearless spirit lives on for future generations. Because in the end, Willie and Kris weren't just country stars. They were outlaws, storytellers, and brothers who changed music forever. Willie's words were touching, but it makes you wonder, if Kris Kristofferson were still alive, would Willie have said the same things, or is this just out of respect for the dead? Would their old tensions still be lurking in the background, or was their bond always stronger than the drama? Let us know in the comments below. While at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.